Alright, how's it going everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are working on our 280ZX. The main point of this video is going to be, for the most part, on doing a conversion kit from 4x4.3 to 5x4.3. We're doing that with a conversion kit that we bought. We'll go ahead and put the specific link for that kit in the description of the video. But beyond that, we're kind of just going to show you how we're doing it here. The wheels that we're working with are the stock wheels from the GR Corolla, and honestly they fit pretty well with the conversion kit spacer setup installed. So you may want to do something similar. I'll go ahead and make sure that we put the specs of the wheels themselves in the description as well, so that if you're looking for something that's kind of flush like what we ended up with, you can also do that. So without further ado, we'll get into the video. Hey, how's it going everybody? Making an addendum to the video that we created about putting the new wheels on the 280ZX, just to give you guys an update, make sure that you have all the information that we had. First and foremost, we ended up changing out the lug nut situation that we had used on the wheels, mainly because, well, two reasons, right? The spacers that came with some lug nuts. However, the lug nuts that came with the kit were not what we were expecting them to be. Pretty sure they shipped us the wrong lug nuts. Unfortunately, they shipped quickly to us, which was great. But again, the thread pitch on the lug nuts they gave us was wrong. It was 12 by 1.5 rather than 12 by 1.25, which is what it advertised as having online. And I reviewed my purchase afterwards just to make sure, but neither here nor there, not a big deal. Because of that, we had confusion, right? The 1.5 thread pitch fit the thread pitch of the new studs that were built into the conversion kit that would go to the wheels. They did not fit the original lugs, or the original studs, sorry, that were on the 280ZX's rotors, right? So one way or another, because of that, we got confused. We tried using those lug nuts on the wheels themselves to basically get them locked into the conversion kit when we got the wheels back on the car. They were clearly, as we found out after the fact, the wrong lug nuts for that purpose. Goes without saying, whenever you are reusing OEM wheels, it's probably best to make sure that you are reusing OEM lugs as well, where possible. If not the OEM ones, then you at least need to make sure that you're using the lug nuts that are of the same type as the OEM ones. In our case, we ended up reusing the OEM ones for the GR Corolla. They work much better. The car was smooth after that. Without them, we were having a bunch of what we thought were bump steer issues, and we thought it was related to scrub radius and other things. It wasn't. It was literally just the fact that we didn't have the wheels on, tightly enough, and so they were wobbling around. So make sure you do that. Probably a good tip. We also ended up using look-alike lug nuts that were similar to the ones that came with the kit, but were the correct thread pitch of 12 by 1.25. Jeez. We ended up using those to lock in the spacer/conversion apparatus to the rotor assembly itself. So once we had done those two swap overs, the car was much more smooth. We no longer had the bump steer issue, and we ended up kind of using Loctite at that point to make sure that the conversion kit would stay situated on the rotor apparatus, without issue long term. So that's what we ended up doing. I'll go ahead and let you get back to the video now, but just keep that in mind as we're going through some of this. You'll see that we ended up, using the original lug nuts and kind of doing a DIY thing. If you do it well, maybe things can turn out right, but long-term safety should prevail, and also, you're going to feel it right away if something's off. So, yeah. All right, so inside of this box is more of what you are seeing here. This is kind of the full setup, so I'll walk you through it really quick. This back piece right here, the thicker piece, I'm not sure how many millimeters this is, but it's pretty thick.
is what is going to go directly onto, the inside of the wheel itself. So this is where you're going to take, the 4 lugs, and you are going to go ahead and line them up and push this guy on. Super easy, super simple. Where you might run into some issues is with, whatever lug nuts you're using. If they have, one of those washers that's kind of built into it, or otherwise are just kind of too wide from a diameter perspective, you might have trouble getting them into these holes to guide them in. We dealt with that by reusing the stock ones. And specifically, what we end up doing is we go ahead and cut this off, and then we also cut the top off and make it essentially an open-ended lug nut, just to, again, make sure that we can fit it on, and also make sure that we're able to go far enough down so that we can get good sealing contact between, the little seat here and, the lugs themselves. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're doing it a little bit of, a DIY way, but nothing wrong with it. It'll work just fine. You could also probably pick up some aftermarket lug nuts, that have a less small diameter, and do them that way. Specifically, when you are looking for lug nuts that will fit for a 280ZX, what you're looking for essentially is something that has, I should say, a thread pitch of, I want to say 12 by 1.25. So 12 by 1.25. That's what you're kind of looking for, and that'll, fit perfectly. But it can be a little bit hard to find unless you're looking online specifically. So if you go to an Ace Hardware or whatever, good luck. We had trouble, which is why we just decided to do it this way instead of waiting for something to come in. Again, probably better to get something that actually is fit and made for that application, but this should work fine for what we need. Now, once you get your lug nuts back on, seated and everything, then you're going to put this top piece on. And this top piece lines up very specifically. You can see all the holes are lined up here now. Or you should be able to see all the way around, basically. But that's not always going to be the case, right? If you turn it and you try to fit and you're not seeing all the holes line up, then just keep going until eventually they all do. So keep that in mind. And once they do eventually all fit, then the next step is going to be to use these guys, these little bolts, these little hex bolts basically, and they are going to lock the two pieces together, and this is where the conversion comes in, right? So you have your new studs directly in here, and you're going to use those, of course, to put the new wheels on, and they give you some lug nuts to do that as well, which is great. And yeah, and then, so once you get these all tightened up and torqued down and everything, you can go ahead and put it on, put the wheel on, and then you're pretty much good from there. Obviously, you want to torque the wheel down to whatever the normal specification is, and that's pretty much it, man. So that's what we're going to do in this video, and then we're just going to do kind of a quick, check around the car to verify, especially with the front wheels, that everything's fitting as it should. And if not, of course, you may want to do a little bit of trimming. We have kind of an aftermarket fiberglass body kit, if you want to call it that, that's on this 280ZX. It was put on there by the previous owner. I think he fabricated most of it himself, which is cool. But you'll see there's probably going to be a little bit of trimming that we're going to need to do in some areas, but again, not a big deal. So. So, what you're going to do is you can take the thicker piece right here, go ahead and put it on the studs. Orientation doesn't really matter. In our case, like I talked about before, you have to line up the holes that you're seeing here, so remember that when we get to that point. We'll go ahead and get our studs that'll hold it to the actual suspension geometry, our rotor and everything.
Here's another way we can go about this. We're gonna do each one on this one. Put it on and back it off.
Sure.
Just zip it on, zip it off.
Okay.
It'll rethread itself a little bit. There you go. Back off. And do that with each one.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and thread them.
And this is if you don't have, didn't go get your own lug nuts. Problem with this setup, it came with lug nuts to hold the tire on, but not lug nuts to hold the assembly on. So we had to do some crafty stuff to make it work, but you could probably go to AutoZone or something and find the right one. We just decided to go this way.
Remember what size these were in thread pits?
Yeah, they are 12 125. 1.25. Usually they'll say Nissan on just ask for Nissan bolts. They'll probably be the right ones. Nissan logo.
Okay, so finally got everything situated the way we wanted. We used the correct bolts at this point, or lug nuts rather, I should say, to kind of get the whole apparatus together. Again, make sure you use the correct ones for the wheel as well. Now what we're doing as extra insurance, we're going to use some Loctite on the studs as well that are going to connect the two pieces that make up the conversion kit.
And we also put Loctite on the first part.
Yep.
The lug nuts.
So just extra insurance. Alright, and there it is. So, let's take a quick look around the car. As you can see, when you look at kind of how flush it is, right? Probably got just a little bit of tire poke, but honestly it looks pretty good, I would say. And when you lower it, it'll probably be even a little bit closer than what it looks like now. Yeah. Same in the back. I think in the back it's a little bit less intense, but kind of pretty good setup, I would say, honestly. There it is. Looks a little bit more aggressive. Not crazy over the top or anything, but a little bit. So now that we got the car down, one thing you'll want to do is turn it on and then steer lock out on left and right. Have someone else watch. Basically you're just checking for clearance, right? You want to make sure that the wheels are not going to brush up against anywhere on the inside of the wheel well itself, on any of the components, you know, of the body panels associated with it. So we're going to do that now real quick.
Do it again. Like that. Do it again. Okay, go around. Alright, good. Got a little trim we can do there, but I think we'll be okay.
Okay, so that's essentially what you do. If you don't have another person, you could do what I did. You could put your phone up against a brick or something, you know, go through the motions, turning the wheel all the way to lockout on both ends, and then review the footage and see, especially if you hear something. But again, we see there's a little bit of trimming maybe for, the bottom edges of some of the body panels. Really not too bad. Should be pretty quick and easy to do. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and take the car for a test drive to see how much better it handles than stock, especially on much newer tires and also wider tires. So, one thing you want to keep in mind if you are doing something similar to what we're doing, i.e. taking an older vehicle, particularly an older vehicle that has much smaller wheels, and completely changing that with a more modern setup, chances are you are going to be sapping away some power from the vehicle, and that's just due to the extreme difference in the circumference of the tire overall, and also the weight generally of the tire and wheel setup. Now, in our case, we moved from a 14-inch wheel with a fairly big sidewall. I'll put the specs in. I don't know them off the top of my head, but generally circumference of the wheel and tire setup being smaller than the new setup. And we went from a 14-inch wheel to an 18-inch wheel, an 18-inch wheel setup with much less sidewall. Now, I mean, you can just pick this up, right, and it's pretty light. Definitely lighter than the new 18-inch wheel setup. The new 18-inch wheels are about 22 pounds each. When you're talking about wheel and tire weight together, it's probably a little bit more than that. I'm not quite sure how much more than that, but something to keep in mind again. Generally speaking, it's heavier than what we had on the car before. Now, when we get to the driving portion of this video, you might notice that if you have a 280ZX and it's mostly stock, the car, from a throttle perspective, is less responsive. The reason for that, again, is because we are using way bigger wheels. It takes more to turn those wheels. That saps power away. And yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to it. So keep that in mind if you're going to do something similar. Another thing you might want to consider is if you have a working speedometer, it's going to be completely inaccurate depending on the difference in overall size comparative to the original setup. If your new setup has about the same size in terms of the total circumference, diameter, etc., you're probably fine. You're going to get a mostly accurate speedometer reading, but in our case, again, we're not going to. We ended up moving to that setup because eventually what we'd like to do is make the car a project track car, sort of. We want to take it on circuits, and obviously if you want to do that, more tread width is better. Less sidewall is also better because the less flex you have, the more responsive the vehicle is going to be when it comes to turning. There's going to be less deflection, essentially. And generally speaking, it's just going to handle quite a bit better than something like this would. This is really nice, of course, for if you just want to cruise around town. This is going to eat up, the kind of differences in the road, the issues that you might run into, on public roads a lot better than, something that's more low profile, of course. This is all, pretty standard stuff, and you probably know this for the most part. But again, just a breakdown of what we're doing, why we're doing it. So, yeah. Oh, it's locked. Thanks. Right, now you can. So we are in the Z now, and just kind of going for a quick ride. Oh. To get a feel for the car. See how it's doing. And it's still pretty quick, honestly, for what it is. Like we talked about before, the bigger wheels are gonna sap some of the power away, but it's pretty light, so not a huge deal for us just yet. And what we're really looking for is making sure that we're not getting a bunch of weird feedback through the steering wheel.
And we'll kind of show you that here really quick. Essentially, we want to make sure there's no bump steer, there's no jitters through the steering wheel itself, because that would be indicative of, you know, maybe making too big of a change to the setup of the suspension as it currently sits, to the point where, you know, we're causing some instability, right? And there's other things to look for too, but that's kind of the biggest thing for us. We'll talk more about it later out of the car, but, you know, we essentially added 2 inches of width onto, you know, kind of the width of the wheelbase of the car when we added this conversion kit. So the issue you start to run into there potentially is like scrub radius, things of that nature, and that can cause, again, some of that instability that we're talking about.
Alright guys, so that was it for this video. There's a lot more that I need to learn about suspension generally. I'm still learning a lot myself. I'd like to make a follow-up video where we start discussing and maybe implementing changes to the suspension setup on the Z so that we can fix some of the issues we did run into. I think the biggest one being, you know, maybe the excessive steering feedback through the steering column. And there might be some other things too. We need to do some more intensive testing with the car to kind of really figure out what needs to happen. This may, you know, be a temporary setup because I know it's not ideal when you have a big 2-inch plus thick conversion kit between, you know, the rotor itself and the wheel. So I'm well aware of that, but for now it's what we got and it's what we're working with. And again, we might change that in the future. Stay tuned as I do learn more. Again, I will be making a secondary video where we can kind of explain suspension concepts as I learn more about them. And we can talk about things like bump steer, as I mentioned in this video, quite a bit more. What to look for, how you might cause it, how to avoid it. And also, you know, some other issues that might arise when you're changing the suspension setup or components of the suspension setup on, you know, an older vehicle. So stay tuned. Hopefully I'll have that, you know, sooner rather than later. We have other projects that we're working on as well and that I'm going to be making some videos of, like the Corolla when we get that back in. But in the meantime, thanks again for listening in, and I will see you guys again soon. Take care.